Okay. Hey,
Hi, how's it
it's nice
going?
to see you again.
Yeah, it's almost like I just saw you or something. We were like already
hmm
talking on the phone or something like that.
hmm
My name is John,
I'm Maria,
and this is
and
just a side quest.
this is HeadFest.
Yeah.
Uh, I feel like we almost said it in unison, but we're not quite there yet.
Oh no, it wasn't even close. It was like a second off.
Oh, on my end, it was pretty close.
Mm, yeah. Well, we will not work on it. Uh, I'm gonna.
We'll try it next week. We'll see what happens.
I don't know. Sorry. That was my cousin calling. Probably to be like, "Hey, what's going on? What you doing? I heard you were helping Jeremy with his computer troubles. Also, come over, come eat."
Oh yeah, John builds computers.
No, I don't. Um, that's that makes it sound like it's like, oh, that's what I do for a living. I was like, no.
John builds computers for fun.
Oh, okay. Um, we're not talking about that. We're getting sidetracked already. Uh,
hmm Yeah, we're talking about D&D. So I think last time we were talking about character creation.
oh
So I know
yeah,
because
that's
you
what you
went
were
back
thinking
and
about.
checked.
That's
Yeah,
yeah.
we couldn't remember actually. We had to go back and look.
What do you mean we? I was like, I'm pretty sure it was talking about character creation and
I'm
like
not
personalities.
positive.
I wasn't
All right, so do
positive,
you
but
wanna
and
do you
yeah,
wanna get us started? Because I know I cut you off last week.
nah, you can go first. But we
You're
were talking about like how much of your personality is in your character, and like general character creation stuff in general is kind of like where that tends to go. Because this is a question that I tend to ask people in general, but I play D&D with. Like how much of you is in a character, like, and what is your like character creation process? Like, do you go think of like your class first? Do you think of your race? Do you think of, your personality? Do you think of your aesthetic? That's kind of like, I don't know. It's just like super interesting to me, and just I'm very curious about that kind of thing. Just seeing how different people's brains work and like what their preferences are, because typically you do a thing that you're most excited about first, right? So
right.
what are
So
you excited? Yeah, sorry, go
it's
ahead.
making a Pinterest board. So I usually come up with like the look and the vibe of the character. They get their own Pinterest board, and then kind of based on the world setting and like what I'm thinking for based on the rest of the party as well. I'll try and come up with a backstory that I think can add some hooks. One thing that I really like as a DM is if a player has a backstory that is not crazy long, because I've had some like 10 to 30 page backstories from players before. But not so short that it has almost no information. Like I've gotten paragraph long backstories. So my ideal length for a backstory is like 1 to 4 pages, maybe enough that I get a clear sense of what the character has done and what their goals are. I try and give my character an immediate goal and then maybe a suggestion, or not suggestion, but like a hint of what a larger term goal might be. So, for example, like having a few things that are unresolved that if they were to come up would take precedent and would be important. But I think it's important to give a short term immediate goal that makes sense for the world setting so that you can interact with the party and have a reason to adventure with them. Because if you're content in your pastoral town, I think you end up being a very reactive character where you're reacting to things happening to you. And characters that have some sort of initiative or motivation, I think, are more interesting to watch, even though it's not necessarily something that where it's like, I have to go on this specific quest. I think it's good to keep it broader than that because I feel like there's a kind of a fine balance between like having initiative as a player and falling into like main character syndrome where it's about your quest right now, it's time sensitive because you don't want to push your fellow players into it. It's collaborative storytelling. Um, so I think ideally the sort of backstory and story that I would like to form a character around is something that has like a general want that can be accomplished by going and adventuring, whether that be money, power, knowledge, hoping that you'll stumble upon something that will break a curse that you've been bestowed with, hoping that you'll find somebody who, you're not quite sure where to start looking for them. And then if the DM decides to throw that your way, then you can engage with it. Um, I really like having a few friendly and a few unfriendly NPCs, and then a couple hooks that the DM can pull on if they so choose to. For example, I had a friend, we were very close, they disappeared 5 years ago, and I don't really know what happened to them. And it could be, like they ran off to get married and they're living happily ever after, but it could also be they were kidnapped by the big bad and you have to go save them. You know, it's kind of up to the DM to do that. And as a DM, I love open hooks like that, where I can take something and I can work it into another player's backstory so that when a character has an arc, it can involve more than one player, or it can fit into something that already exists in the plot that everybody has created together, or the stuff like plans for the big bad or a big bad, so that there's more personal investment in fighting them as opposed to just there's an evil, we should destroy it. So as a player, I end up going with looks and vibe, a story that kind of fits those parameters, but also fits that look and vibe. And then I don't really care about build. I will pick the spells that feel fun and that feel like they're in character, and pick the things that feel like they would be fun to role play.
Okay, but how much of your personality do you put into each individual character, like of yourself? Because I know
Everyone.
there's some people who are like, "Oh, I play games to not be myself, and I have like an idea of like, oh, this is the version of myself that I'd want to be. I want to be like more confident, more extroverted, more intelligent, more charismatic, more XYZ thing." Um, and in a way, like D&D is like kind of like therapy for them. And there's also people who are just like, I just want to do the crazy things that I would not be able to do in real life. So I just want to be a little chaos goblin. And then they get into a lot of trouble, and then they also just like hate the character we're playing because they choose things that they wouldn't necessarily do themselves, and it's like they're, you know, the embodiment of someone who is not them at all.
Right. And I mean, I think regardless of how much you're trying not to be yourself, everyone is going to be bringing some sort of core part of their personality to their character, whether or not it's deliberate. I think there's a method of acting called the Stanislavski method, where you use something called personalization, where you sort of like sub something that you really want for something the character really wants, and then when you're speaking about it, you're speaking about your own thing, but you're using other words as a placeholder. And if you're able to fully immerse yourself in that method of acting, it's about being as much yourself as possible, but within a different set of circumstances. And I think anyone given a different set of circumstances that are to an extreme that they would warrant going out on life-threatening adventures and like handling magic items and creatures and stuff like that, like obviously that's going to change you and that's going to put you in a very different position. Um, and I think pushing different parts of yourself based on the way that you personalize things or see things can really change how you react to stuff. So I tend to view it sort of as that, where you know you are being very much yourself. Just the way that you relate to things in this world changes depending on the character you're trying to play.
Okay. Um. So, I know for me personally, I tend to go uh when I create a character, I tend to just choose like one aspect of myself and then hyper exaggerate that. So it's still
Mm-hmm.
like me, but that part of me to like an extreme. Whether it be like, oh, this is just like my whimsical, carefree, I'm gonna do whatever I want, no consequences side, and then whatever chaos that it comes from, but you know, comes from that. Or it'll be like, this is my self-sacrificial side, and I'm just a little goody two shoes, and I just want everyone to be okay, even if it means that I die. Um, and yeah, and I think that's like for me very fun because like it's still very much a character. It's still not just a character, but it's like it's a caricature of, you know, some personality trait of mine. So it's still like very fun because like yeah, like of course this is exactly what I would do if I'm in this particular mood. Um, and then like you are kind of like living out that uh thing that you do like in movies. You're like you're watching movies like, dude, what the heck? You're splitting up. Like this is so dumb. You should be doing this. Or like, you know, why are you hiding under the bed? Everyone hides under the bed. You should be hiding in the closet. Um, yeah, and so like it makes it a lot more easy to be immersed into the world for me. But then after that, I tend to go like, all right, so this is the personality. Like, what kind of class would I go, and what background goes with that to make the back like class interesting? So like one character was a ranger, and I was like, okay, let's do a noble ranger. Make that make sense. How does that make sense? Like, all right, ran away from home. Why did he run away from home? Ran away from home because he had an arranged marriage and he didn't want to be in it. So he fucked off and he had to learn how to live in the woods. And that's kind of like how I like created that character and like kind of like, you know, kind of spiral from there. And then the DM had some hooks of like, okay, well, your parents are looking for you. and there's like a lot of relationships, and like the reputation's a little tarnished because you ran away and you were promised to another like rich powerful family, and now you got to deal with that because you have to go back into the city, and the party needs to go back, and there's like really no getting around it. Like, fuck, do I try to like sneak my way through? Do I kind of like come in to face the music? Like, what do you do from there? Like, that stuff's interesting to me. And this particular character was a little more like calculating, which is pretty fun. So yeah, just like measuring the cost benefit analysis, and like, is it worth it? Like, okay, if I do get caught, it could be pretty fucking bad. Let's just fucking go and face the music, right?
Right. So what advice then would you give to new players who are having trouble getting immersed in a character and acting in a way that's different? Because I know that in a lot of D&D players that I've met who are trying to role play, they have a hard time making decisions that they themselves wouldn't necessarily make in a given scenario. So for example, like their character might hide under the bed because they're supposed to be goofy, but they're not playing them as goofy because they want to succeed. Um, so I've run into problems, like with low intelligence people playing high intelligence characters and high intelligence people playing low intelligence characters, and it's really difficult to do. I think intelligence is probably the hardest stat to fake in D&D.
I would say
But
charisma is right.
I think intelligence. Okay, so
Ooh,
what's your
let's argue.
argument for
Let's fight.
charisma?
We're fighting.
Yeah.
Let's just get started. Let's do it.
I
Go
would
ahead.
say, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so my argument for charisma not being the hardest to fake is that regardless of what's said, if you are good looking or charming enough, you can get away with saying it. But if you're trying to be intelligent, there are some things that just, no matter how you think about it, are not going to be smart things to say.
Okay, I would argue that a lot of charisma is also associated with like some degree of like social skills, and like being able to be like socialized and being sociable just in general, right? Like, if you're like a very shy person and you like try to force yourself to like be outgoing and like exuberant and like charming and engaging, it doesn't tend to come off very well. I think that in general, like, you could tell that someone's trying, but they feel very uncomfortable, and like that, like mental and emotional like capacity just quickly just plummets because they're trying to be something that they may not necessarily like vibe with, even if they want to be more like that. Whereas like if you're an intelligent, like you're not like the smartest person in the world, you could like feasibly be, you know, like, okay, I don't know how exactly I want to do this, but this is what I want to do, and my character's smart enough to do so, and then like kind of like absorb through osmosis of like, okay, the DM will kind of like give you a hand here, and like kind of like, okay, you probably do this XYZ thing, and then like maybe like be able to pick up through like how it's being described to you, how to do it from next time, and just like learning, right? But as far as like forcing yourself to be more charismatic, because I generally believe that like you can always learn something. It may be difficult, but you can always learn something. But like forcing yourself to like be an extrovert when you're introverted, speaking as an introvert, that's like impossible. Like when I'm like socially depleted, I'm done. I'm done for the day. It's it. I'll see you guys next week. I don't want to hear from you again.
I think when you have that social energy, though, you can push yourself to be charismatic, and introversion doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it.
Yeah,
I
but
would-
like some people aren't sociable at all, right? They're just shy and like. Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting, but like now we're
Mhm.
just talking about it.
So I would say that, like, maybe the thing that I've encountered before is that people who are really trying to play high intelligent people don't tend to have the humility to say, this is what I want to do, but I'm not entirely sure how to go about it intelligently, because I think it takes a lot to say, like, I don't quite know how to do this. If you're trying to come off as very smart, and maybe that's just people who are really trying to lean into high intelligence characters tend to be more prideful because they think they're more intelligent. Whereas I think if you're not charismatic, like you will know it, unless you have a very specific oblivious personality. Um, but I think with charisma, oftentimes, people who are shy are very aware that they're shy, and they don't have as much trouble asking for help or accepting help if it's offered. Um, and I think, having a gimmick of, like, they smile charmingly, can I make a persuasion check, please? Like, I don't know how to talk to people. Like, that can come off as endearing and charismatic kind of in and of itself. Whereas if you're trying to explain something intelligently, there is kind of a right or wrong way, because if the people you're playing with are more intelligent than you and they say, like, that doesn't make any sense, then the person feels stupid, and that's a much worse feeling than not feeling charismatic. So I think it's kind of tricky because it's a mix of managing the player's pride and trying to push them in a direction where they can come off the way they want to come off, um, and not just handing them things because their character sheet says something.
Interesting. I think there's like something to touch upon there because it's going to be different for every single person.
Mm-hmm.
There's a large degree of subjectivity here, but I don't know. I think that I don't ever really feel stupid, even if I do something stupid. I'll just own it. Like, fuck, dude, I'm really fucking dumb. I don't know why I did that. Like, a smarter person than me probably wouldn't have done that. But you don't get that person. You get me. Sorry, guys. Okay, roll for initiative. Like,
I
um,
think also,
go ahead.
since you don't have an ounce of anxiety, it's a little bit uniquely different for you. I think most millennials would feel more self-conscious.
Oh yeah, just don't have anxiety. Just don't care what people think, man. You'll be like, you'll have so much more fun in life. I promise.
I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, but no, like I said, there's a large degree of like subjectivity there. Um, I acknowledge that like I'm pretty blessed. I don't hardly ever feel embarrassed or stupid or whatever. Like a lot of it's just like, okay, I just didn't know something. Like I was just ignorant and now I know better or I should know better. But a lot of times I just want to do the fun thing. Um, but yeah, I can concede to some level uh, that intelligence might be more difficult to fake. But I feel like it's going to be circumstantial regardless. But I think we can all agree that it's never going to be, well, it's never going to be strength or dexterity. It might be constitution, because if you never show up or you're always sick or something, then people are going to notice.
Um, yeah, I think in general, for sort of like the intellectual skills, there's a certain amount of like buy-in where you're just going to assume a character comes off differently than how they're acting. It can be difficult if characters or players are really uncomfortable with role play in general, and giving personality to their characters. And I think part of the fun of D&D, part of what makes it really feel like a collaborative story that has weight to it, is having that amount of role play. And I think bringing a portion of yourself to a character, can often help with that. Um, or using some method of personalization or removing yourself in some way. And I think, it's different for everyone what works for them. But I think the idea is just, like, if you insert yourself into a situation as a character who is non-antagonistic to other player characters, and you're trying, if you're at a good table, they're going to engage with you and they're going to encourage that. And if you're with a good DM, they're going to encourage that, either with inspiration or by rewarding you with, like NPCs from your backstory coming up. Um, I know for a fact that, if I throw an NPC at one of my players, they are very uncomfortable with role play and prefer to watch more than anything, and they're not going to engage with them. Whereas I have other characters where if a mention of an NPC they know is mentioned, they will immediately light up and engage and try and like interact with them in some way. So I think even if you're not great at it, just that desire for interaction can, and enthusiasm for it, can feed so much of a story, even if it's not perfect. So I think just the willingness to engage, even if you're not good at it, even if you're trying to play a character who's differently charismatic or intelligent than you, like, I still think that's much more important than doing it well.
Yeah, I also think that yeah, no, I would probably agree with that. And just in general, just find a good table, just get a good DM and good other players, and then like even if you're not good, you'll be fine because I'll help you out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if only we're all so blessed. I do want to touch on the question that you asked initially, like how do you, like, if you were a new player, like what would you do to like be another character, like play a character even though you're not really comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
My advice genuinely is don't. Just don't. Um, Instead, just like pick like a martial class. Pick like barbarian or rogue or monk or ranger. Like where your main stat is going to be like strength or dexterity or Constitution, which is no one ever, but yeah, Constitution I guess is one of them. Um, and then just like kind of like just play as yourself, so you kind of have a feel, like get your toes wet first. Don't go full in there unless like you really really want to. In which case, by all means. But in that case, this advice doesn't apply to you. This is for someone who doesn't really know how to play a character. I think first and foremost is like learn how to play pretend, and like okay, this is your situation. Like you're a very like sneaky, dexterous like rogue. Um, but then like for the social interaction part of D&D role play, you're just yourself. Like what are your motivations for if this was like your upbringing, like what is your motivation for like going on this adventure? It's like, dude, I just want to get fucking rich. So that's why I'm a rogue. I'm sneaking in to steal stuff. I mean, it's just very easy to go from there. It's just like very fluid.
Hmm. Speaking of characters, where their main stat is, like Dex or Connor, something like that, besides charisma and intelligence. One thing that I think is really cool as a DM is that you can create subclasses on D&D Beyond where your main stat is not the main stat of the class. So I had a player who was really interested in cross-classing to Warlock, but she had a negative charisma modifier, but was really high in wisdom. But for story reasons, it made like a ton of sense for her to take this Warlock pact. And she didn't want to completely nerf her character mechanically. So if you go on D&D Beyond, you can build a subclass, and then under what is it, casting modifier or something like that. It's on the main page. You can change it from like charisma to wisdom. And I changed it to wisdom, and she wasn't, I mean, she as a person was decently charismatic, but if you had, something similar where you didn't want to play your character as charismatic and your DM is open to it, they can shift your subclass if you really want to play something that doesn't mechanically work necessarily. And a lot of DMs, I will say, like, that's not necessarily the norm for DMs, but I had a lot of fun with it. I loved it. I thought it was super entertaining, having like a wisdom-based warlock, and she played it very well, like very wisdom-based. And a lot of it was expressing curiosity and like trying to offer advice to this person she'd made a pact with, who eventually became very good friends with her.
Yeah, definitely not the norm. In fact, if you were
It
at
was
my
really
table,
fun though.
do not expect that to happen at my tables. I'm not doing that. I do like some degree of balance, especially because I make the, PCs OP via boons or items.
Yeah, you break
Or
a lot more rules in other ways, I think.
yeah, I tend to be pretty rule heavy, especially because like I welcome you guys to like do whatever crazy build you guys want to do. If you have the stats for it, if you meet all the prerequisites, we're going like rules is written. In that particular case, I'd probably just like give them the Warlock Invocation feat for free, and then roleplay like having a relationship with this patron, and as they deepen their bond, like I might just like arbitrarily like, okay, you gain another invocation, or you can do warlock stuff. I don't know. It depends on like the particular character, because I tend to personalize and cater whatever thing that happens like specifically to that character, and like I'll be talking to the players like one on one. I don't do as much like surprise stuff to the rest of the group, where it's like I'll collude with like one player and then surprise to the rest of the party. It's like all you guys are surprised or none of you guys are surprised. That's how this goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something to be said for having one thing mechanically and one thing role play wise. I know that I had in that same game there was someone who was mechanically a sorcerer, but absolutely should have been a warlock. And they just wanted the sorcerer build, but their backstory was very much a warlock pact kind of deal.
Okay.
And yeah, I think
Yeah.
catering to players in different ways. DMs are going to do things differently at their table. I specifically ask players not to create their characters for DPS because I want them to be balanced. Because if they're balanced or even not optimal, then I can do fun things like that and not worry about completely destroying the balance of combat. And part of that is like just sticking within a certain range of levels that you feel comfortable catering combat to. I don't know.
I also
How
think
do
that
you deal with it?
I
Go
think
ahead.
I think also think part of that is because you don't like combat. You specifically don't like combat, so like having to like balance around combat when like, okay, well shit, this motherfucker is way OP because they like are the like dictionary definition of the power gamer. so it's like hard to like make everyone else feel like relevant. Uh,
Right. I would say I don't mind combat. Um, but it's also not fun for me looking through everyone's stats, trying to figure out how things are going to stack or balance. I'd prefer the players took care of that and had their own fun with it and just kept in mind that we're telling a story, not trying to defeat bad guys as quickly as possible, because that takes some of the narrative element out of it. And I'm so scared of killing people. I don't want to kill my players. I want combat to be challenging, but when you have someone who's, like created their character to deal as much damage as possible in one hit, it makes a lot of these like story-based climactic moments feel kind of nerfed. And I know there are some encounters that are fairly simple and straightforward that I have no problem with. For example, you're attacked by monsters on the road, but for a lot of the bigger battles that are very story focused, that have extra mechanics and have custom player character or custom character sheets and stuff, I tend to get kind of panicked in the moment because I know the players are all waiting on me and there are a lot of enemies to go through. And then I tend to forget, like, because I'll go through the characters and I'll be like, ooh, okay, so this can mix with this, and like this will be super cool when it happens. And then I'll just be frantically scrolling through the character sheet in combat and I'll forget about it and I'll remember in retrospect and be really annoyed at myself. Um, but I know I think you run more combat than I do, John. I mean, how do you manage like lots of different character sheets and enemies in larger battles?
so I have multiple monitors. Yeah, that helps a ton. Uh, and yeah, generally I don't know. I think this is part of a thing where like, look at me with my charmed life. I don't have anxiety. I just don't worry about these kinds of things. Like I just don't worry about it. Like, okay, we'll go into combat. If they can handle it, we can handle it. If they don't, they don't. A lot of the times, the way that I build my worlds is the world is the world. It is what it is. There is a dragon here. There was always a dragon here. I didn't create a dragon here just for you guys to find. It was always there. If you guys find it at level 3, get fucked. If you guys find it at level, 15, good on you. You just got a horde. But like if you like find it at level 3 and you choose to engage with it, that's on you. I run a very sandbox game. Like you guys don't have to do anything. There's nothing you have to do. Just recognize there's always consequences for doing something or not doing something. And that's kind of like how I roll with it. And if some things are too hard, it's fine. I don't want to kill my players, but I'm always I will feel really bad as I do so.
For things like that, how much warning do you give your players that they're walking into a situation that they might not be able to handle?
We talked about this episode 1 actually.
Did you tell them that they were going to walk into like a dragon lair or something, or do you just?
I give them the signs for it, even if they like. I'll give them like. Go ahead.
Because I think we did talk about this last episode, but it was in regards to players wanting to do something stupid. Yeah. And this is in regards to players encountering something in the world that they might not know is not meant for them right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, like, I'll give them like checks. There'll be like rumors around, and when they get up to there, like, even if they roll poorly on a like perception check or investigation check, you still give them enough to know, like, oh fuck, this might be a dragon. We are like 4 HP each. I know we're looking for shelter, but maybe this one isn't it. And yeah, like, I guess like I have the luxury of just having full faith and confidence in my players. Like they're all wicked smart, and so yeah, they do things like unexpectedly all the time. Sometimes they do the crazy yellow stuff, but it also works out for them because usually they go in and they'll have like some semblance of like a plan. It's like, okay, we're going to go in and I've got 2 level 3 spell slots left. Here's what we're going to do. And then they just, kind of go nuts from there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like, so there's a lot of like teamwork there, and they're all like smart players too. And, I never worry about combat being a thing that's like too much for them because they know that they could always run away. They have run away before. They hardly ever do so because like even with like limited resources and like no hit die left to short rest with, like they're just like, nah, we got this, no sweat. Joke's on you. I've had this magical item since session 2 that you probably forgot about. But haha, I've got these like dimensional shackles. And yeah, just yeah, I think that's like one of the advantages I have over you, right? Where I don't DM for pay. I DM for fun, so I could be highly discriminatory about who is invited to my table.
That's true. For like someone who's a newer DM and is kind of trying to screen and figure out like who would be good for their table, like what tips would you give someone like that?
Um, so my approach to D&D is that this is just a game. This is just a game, and this is a really fun and important game to me, but it is still just a game. The important question is like, do I like these people? Are these people that I would be friends with outside of a table? Like, are these people that I find myself like talking to or playing other games with, like, you know, tabletop RPG or, you know, video games or board games or like whatever, like, or just hanging out? Like, can I see myself hanging out with these people? And if the answer is yes, you'll probably be fine, because for the most part, like if I ever get into like a dispute with a friend, like I could always hash it out. Like it's never so serious, and especially not so serious over a game. Um, so as long as you guys like each other and like prioritize like the friendship, the relationship, you're gonna be okay. And like because you're friends, you're more likely to like have common interests in like similar, you know, interests and sense of humors, hopefully. Um, and so like D&D is just fun because you just like playing pretend together. It's like literally, you know, Stranger Things, where like a bunch of little kids are just like, you know, kind of bunch of dorks and are just like playing D&D together. And that's like how the whole thing, you know, they ascribe like the I don't do this is not a Stranger Things spoiler podcast, so maybe I don't talk about this. Yeah, but if you don't know about
I mean,
Stranger Things, like
the last
surely
season came out like over a year ago. I think you're good.
has it? Wow,
Hmm.
time's weird, dude. Um,
Yeah, those kids are all busy.
mhm. uh, but yeah, as far as like bringing people into your table, if you don't know them, if you're not friends with them, absolutely interview. Just like think about like, you know, questions that would like exemplify like who that person is, even if you're not asking that like directly. It's like, what's the most memorable moment for you in D&D? And like some people are, you know, they go like, oh, there was this one time in combat, you know, everybody was down and then I rolled a nat 20. Like, okay, well, the most fun thing for you is like, you know, everything was at stakes here, you're going to TPK and then you were the hero, and like it was super memorable. Or like, you know, oh, we had to go in and like break into a vault, and like we all like collaborated, and like this the rogue did this, and then the wizard like gave them haste, and then like, you know, like, okay, the fun thing for you is like teamwork and just like cooperation, collaboration. uh and then, you know, some people are just like, yeah, there was like a very dramatic scene where like they made the DM cry, and it's like, okay, got it. Like there's like, it says so much about a person. Like this is the most memorable fun moment for you in D&D. Like you learn so much from that question. um and I think that everybody should be asking it when you interview people to enter your table.
Hmm. I think it depends too on the kind of table you want to run. So I mean, the right questions to ask are going to change if you want a hack 'em slash 'em dungeon crawl game versus if you want to run something with high RP. Because I think there are plenty of players who are great players, but just not great players for your table. So a lot of that is not necessarily just figuring out like, oh, can we be friends? But can we be friends and do we want to play the same game? Because D&D is so versatile. I think the kind of game you're playing like switches up a lot. One thing that I've been asking is, you know, like between story, role play, exploration, combat, puzzles, can you rank those in order of how much of them you'd like to experience in your game? And if role play is not in the top two or three, then they're probably not a great player for my table because I love role play and story is one of the most important things in my games. Um, I would say too, stating when you whatever posts you put on, you know, like if you're leaving a flyer at your local game store or if you're putting a post on like a Facebook group or a Reddit group or something like that, um, putting the things that are important to you that are non-negotiable. Um, I have heard that just saying, you know, we're an inclusive LGBTQ plus friendly table, you know, then people who are not LGBTQ plus friendly are not going to apply. The people who you really don't want there are not going to hit you up. because they know things that are very important to you that have to be, okay with someone if they're at the table. So I think specifically saying that you have safety rules in place. So whether that be X, N, or O cards, whether that be stars and wishes, whether that be lines and veils, whatever safety regulations you want to use, saying that you want to use them because real problem players do not like safety rules. Um, saying, like the kind of things that you're interested in, like looking for a hierarchy group, stuff like that, if it's really important to you. And just like, I wouldn't have a huge list because it discourages people if they don't have everything on the list. But I would say just pick like the 3 things that are most important to you and put them on whatever post that is, just to weed out people who are looking for something completely different.
Yeah. Also, just long lists in general, people don't read them. They just don't.
Yes. It's just
Um,
3 short bullet points.
yeah. Personally,
I will
I
say,
don't use like an X and an O card, or like for me, because like everybody that I invite in is like, oh, I'm friends with you, or like I could be your friend. We just like have a talk, like, hey, like we'll have like session 0, and like we'll have like a, like clear, like, hey, it is one of like the questions that I asked like during interviews, like, what is your like your approach to conflict, and
mhm.
you know, sorry, go
I
ahead, you want
think
to say something?
well, just taking that with a grain of salt because you are not afraid to stop something and address conflict if it happens. And I think a lot of DMs are feeling more anxious about that. And so those safety rules are for the DM just as much as they're for the players.
I think in general, uh, each DM is gonna be different. Each table is gonna be different, and it's all gonna like come down to what you're comfortable with, what everyone is comfortable with at your table. Um, like how you approach things, how it works for one person is gonna be the same for someone else. Um, and there are some things that you may not need to address at all. Um, you know, I think that for the most part, how you approach it doesn't really matter, but you should always be trying to like address issues as they come up. It may not necessarily have to happen like in that very moment. I am a pretty big fan of like DM's ruling should always, you know, be unless I think we touched upon it like the episode 1 as well, where if something comes up, if you unless you can like come up with like an immediate like source, just like DM's ruling supersedes it, and for the most part, I hope have a DM who like cares about how their players feel, but that's not
Mhm.
necessarily always the case. In which case, that might not be the best table for you. I know it's like a common saying, like no D&D is better than bad D&D, and I, from my own personal experience, can absolutely subscribe to that. I don't know.
No, I feel that too. I've had some very bad D&D experiences and some very very good D&D experiences and they're basically a different game.
Yeah, like it always feels bad when you're like you can't wait for the session to end, so you just aren't playing anymore. That's always a bad feeling. Um, but yeah, I know this is something for, I guess, everybody. I don't know if people implement it, but I know that you didn't until I came through. But post game chat is so good. It's so useful. It's so like not just from like a okay, hey, let's get everybody on the same page. DMs can like know what to prepare for, but also like get a read for like how everyone's feeling about things. I think that's such a good tool that not everybody uses, and I think that everybody should.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's stars and wishes as well if you want like a more structured way to approach it. So for those who aren't aware, it's a safety rule that's used by DMs to get feedback from players who might not necessarily offer it or might not necessarily offer it in a constructive way. Because if you talk about things in terms of the positive, you're less likely to get very harsh feedback. And as a new DM, that can be really crushing. So stars are, giving a star and a wish at the end of the session is a star is something that the DM did really well or that another player did really well that you want to reward and point out like, hey, I just want to point out that, like the role play that, like so and so had with their, NPC long lost parent like was really touching. Like I was feeling emotional. And stuff like that just makes people feel good because they put a lot of effort into their characters or the DMs put a lot of effort into their world and knowing that it felt profound or that it felt interesting or engaging is really big. It's important to say that. And then wishes is something that you wish could be different and you want to keep it as positive as possible. I prefer, in regards to giving feedback, like trying to put it into a nice sandwich. So starting with something positive that you like, but, and then have, like the thing you'd like to be changed and then ending on something positive. For example, I love how much effort you feel into the world. I think sometimes it feels kind of overwhelming, the big list that you give us of stuff we could explore. But I love that you put that effort in. I would love a few of those things that we could explore, just maybe not the whole list all the time or something like that, just so that, you can get across what you would like changed without making anybody feel bad. And that goes for criticism of other players as well. I know people who feel really uncomfortable with stuff like that. You can PM your DM, and if you have a good DM, hopefully they'll be a mediator and do something in a way where you feel safe. Because sometimes there are issues with other players, and it can be difficult to address them.
Yeah, I the way that I tend to approach those things is I am actively looking for something that I may not be having fun with. Like, for example, if the DM is like uncomfortable with like role play and like they have a hard time like playing a character or whatever it is, as a player, I might be like, hey, like I really enjoyed the scene that we had with Shop today. Like I thought the character was super fun and interesting. Like I just wanted to like, give credit where credit's due, and like you did a really good job there and I would love to see more of that. So just like keep it all positive all the way through is also like a pretty good way of going about it.
Yeah, encouraging the behavior you'd like to see. And as a
Yep.
DM, you can do that with inspiration, and it is very effective.
Is it interesting? Most of the times when I give inspiration, it tends to be like, okay, you really, really made me laugh. Like we had to like stop session for like a good 2 minutes to get me to stop laughing, and then like, all right, that deserved an inspiration. Or like you did something like particularly like clever, or you had like a really good like role play moment that was like, oh damn, I'm feeling something in this coal of a heart that I have.
I think though that like putting inspiration where you want to see like things expanded on from your players is really important. Like I give inspiration out of game for text RP, and it encourages people to text RP and have conversations outside of session. And then in game, I usually PM inspiration to players who come up with a really clever solution or outsmart me in some way, because I love clever players. Last session, one player had Zone of Truth cast on them as well as an NPC, and they pointed out, or I guess it was pointed out to them. I found out afterwards that NPC could be exempt from the Zone of Truth and could have made their saving throw, and it could be the NPC that's their ally is not saying anything, so they're allowed to lie, but you're not. And she thought of that, and she cast Zone of Truth herself, specifically so that he would have to tell the truth. And that was exactly what had happened. And he had made his save and was prepared to lie. And then because of that, he was forced to tell the truth. So I PM'd that player inspiration because she kind of like thought about it rationally and in a calculated way and kind of figured out what the other player might do and circumvented it. And I thought that was really clever. And I love stuff like that in my games, and I think it encourages players to think outside the box. Whereas John and I actually both played very briefly in an arc of a campaign where the DM just awarded inspiration for like throwaway jokes or puns or like things that he thought was kind of funny or goofy, and it encouraged the campaign to be taken less seriously and to be more of like a goofy, jokey campaign. I think for people who are just looking to like hang out and relax after work, as opposed to like think about a plot. Or think about things in a more strategic way, like it pushes the game towards that, sort of like goofy, like let's just be along for the ride setting. So I think, it does really alter the type of game. And then I played in a 4-year campaign with a DM who never gave me any inspiration for anything regarding like puzzle solving or role play, but then I wrote something in character out of game and mailed it to him as a letter, and he gave me inspiration for that. And so then I did it a couple more times, but he never gave me inspiration again. But it would have been like, if he had, it would have continued that behavior as something that the DM wants to see in their game. So I think you can push your game one way or another through that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I am absolutely that player who's just like, I'm gonna do what I want. If I get DM inspiration, cool. If I don't care. I'm doing it anyways. So
Mhm.
be prepared to run into players like me who are just, maybe a little bit more finicky, but also it's always okay to like, have that conversation and like, hey, this particular behavior is troublesome. Can you like rein that back in or just boot them outright? Because at the end of the day, if someone, no, like that is always something that should
No,
be
no, I know.
available.
I'm so much more hesitant to boot players, and I have like multiple warnings that I give, whereas you're just like, nope, you're gone.
Yeah, but also remember, this is a for funzy campaign that I'm running.
Hmm.
This is something that I do for passion and for just like love of the game, and this is something that like I put a lot of time and thought and effort into. And I,
For sure.
yeah, which isn't to say that like as like if you're a DM who gets paid to do so, that doesn't mean that like this only applies to you if you are like are doing it for fun. Like just because like you're you know being paid to do so, like I imagine you love this game. I imagine that if you're like listening to us talk right now, you are like you have a real problem and you're addicted. You got some real problems. um and yeah, this also like applies to you. Like you know it everything, like we said earlier, like every table is going to be different, every DM is going to be different. Like do what you're comfortable with. um and sometimes like if you're really not feeling it, and like even if is like a paid campaign, like some people just don't deserve a lot of warnings. I'll just
Maybe we can
God.
talk more about it next time. We actually have a game of D&D that we have to get to in a few minutes, so I think we're gonna end that there for now. Maybe we can invite one of the players to join us for this post game.
Oh
But
yeah, we could do that. Oh,
yeah,
you want to talk about this this particular subject?
no, I don't know about this particular subject. I think that might put them in an awkward position, but D&D in general, because we have some very smart players, and I'd love to have them on to talk a little bit about some of their approach to D&D, because one of them especially is very in depth with their character, and they are an amazing note taker and like lore tracker. And I'd love to get some of their thoughts just on their approach to D&D in general too.
Yeah, we can talk about like notes later on too, because I know that like my notes are just nonsensical to everyone else. um
Yes, mine are in a series of maybe 20 different Google Docs, as well as this notebook, which is a complete
yeah,
mess and has a lot of different tabs.
I've got like some physical notebooks. I used to take notes on like my computer. These are
And for
like
a while,
mine for
you
like
were
various
taking them
different
on
campaigns.
sticky notes.
Yeah, and sticky notes. Oh god, there was a time where I was like, I don't know where my notebook is. Just sticky notes it is. So notes are missing. Um, but a lot of my notes are also just like little inside jokes to myself because I didn't expect anyone to read it. It's like, uh, Lady MacGuffin butt face, and it's just like if you don't know what that means, you're not supposed to. That's for me.
We should talk about inside jokes at some point in campaign.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, for now we'll head off. I don't know. I don't know how long this is. Maybe this should just be its own thing, and we could record for next time or something post session. But
Uh, we have a little bit of time left. I think this is about 45 minutes or so, and then um yeah, we have 15 minutes to kill. We can do a little guest showing if you want.
okay, goodbye.
All right, bye. I love you all.